Welcome to You, Me, Empathy. Thank you for listening. We would like to remind you that this podcast is for informational and entertainment purposes only, and is not a substitute for medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Known as just a silly boy with a feely heart. Please consider supporting the show. Check us out on Patreon or simply leave a review on iTunes. Here's your host and creator of the show, Known Wells.
Hello, feely humans. Welcome to another episode of You, Me, Empathy. My name is Known Wells, your humble creator and host, and founder of the Feely Human Collective, which is about 2 weeks left in the crowdfunding campaign. Go to feelyhumans.co to learn more about that. I will probably mention it at the end of this intro as well. Let's get to talking about what's coming up in this episode, which is episode 116 with my guest, Dene Logan Selkin. Dene is a therapist based in LA, and she is a delight. I mention that about all my guests, I think, because they are. They're feely humans, and Dene is very feely, and she's lovely, and I really enjoyed chatting with her. In this episode, we talk about sobriety, wanting to fit in when you feel left out, mental health and therapy stigma in the African American community, and allowing ourselves to feel our feelings. Lots of feely stuff in this episode. Dene, you're the best. If you're in the LA area, Dene is a therapist at Flow House Therapy. Go check them out. They're at flowhousetherapy.com. And Dene, follow her on Instagram at Dene, that's D-E-N-E, Logan, L-O-G-A-N, Selkin, S-E-L-K-I-N, Dene Logan Selkin. Okay. Before we get to the episode, again, I wanted to remind you, I wanted to remind you that I'm a pest, that I keep talking about this. But you guys, there's about 2 weeks left in the crowdfunding campaign for the Feely Human Collective, which is a new collaborative mental health community I'm building that's launching into the public in March-ish. Still lots to do, but March-ish. And I would love your support. So go to feelyhumans.co and check it out. If you have a few bucks, please contribute. If you don't have money, that's okay too. Please share with other feely friends in your life. Okay. Make sure to follow You, Me, Empathy on Instagram at You, Me, Empathy. We're also on Twitter at You, Me, Empathy, and we have a Facebook group at facebook.com/groups/You, Me, Empathy, and a Facebook page. If you just search for You, Me, Empathy, you'll find it. And follow Feely Human at Feely Human on all the places, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. Go follow. Get feely. This is feely. I'm feely. Dene's feely, and you're feely. We're all feely together. And this is episode 116 on allowing ourselves to feel our feelings with Dene Logan Selkin. Welcome to You, Me, Empathy, a podcast about exploring the struggles we face in our day-to-day lives as humans trying to get by on this wondrous and overwhelming pale blue dot. The intent of You, Me, Empathy is to talk openly, without judgment, about our mental health, our neuroses, our shared anxieties and worries, to create a dialogue that is vulnerable and deeply human and empathetic, and to share that dialogue with others to inspire emotional and cognitive collaboration and insight, so we can, hand in hand, break down the stigma that make us feel shame and guilt for struggling, for feeling our feelings, for being feely humans. You Me Empathy is a safe, friendly space designed to inspire the beauty in each of us. Today I'm feeling at peace because I'm here with therapist, mindfulness, and yoga teacher and perpetual seeker, Dene Logan Selkin. Hello, Dene.
Hello, Noan. What a beautiful way to hear yourself described. I love that. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. No,
Yeah.
I always love coming up with the little, spiels and intros for my guests. So happy to do that.
Wow, I love that. As I was saying right before we started, I have just been a really big fan of you and the work that you do for a while and love your podcast. So I'm just so thrilled and honored to get to speak with you.
Oh my gosh, you're very kind. I'll give you that. But I'll also say it feels weird to hear someone say, I'm a fan of you. Like it just feels, well, so yesterday in therapy, I'm just going to get right into it. Yesterday in therapy, I'm building this. I'm in the process of building a business with the goal of sort of that being out. Well, by the time this is out, I've probably already announced it. But my therapist said, "Don't you think that the reason?" Because I was describing discomfort, I've been overwhelmed, but also it's overwhelming in a good way. It's like this I'm learning, right? And it's excitement and it's change and all these things. And she said, don't you think that, maybe some of the sort of discomfort and the stress is in your sort of, my self-ascribed underpinning of feeling not worthy of this thing, feeling you don't deserve to do this thing, like already sort of limiting yourself in that. And I said, yeah, well, you're probably right. So sorry, that's a long-winded way to say, Dene, that I have this core part of myself that feels like, get out of here with your compliments.
Oh. Well, I love that. I love what your therapist said sort of in response to that. And I think that, I would respond to that in saying that, when I think of you and what I was drawn to with your page and certainly love about your podcast is that I feel like you are one of those people that creates a space to sort of normalize struggle. And I always feel like people who have that gift of doing that for the rest of us, I always feel really safe with, and I think from the moment I heard your voice, I sort of did this exhale and was like, oh, it's Noan's voice. And I think that you do that. And that's a gift that you give to people. And, in the spaces where we feel sort of apprehensive to put ourselves out there and, share ourselves with the world, I think we're sort of keeping those gifts to ourselves and keeping other people from maybe feeling safe in the way that they do when they hear your podcast or in your presence or with the things that you share. So I'm really grateful that you put yourself out there. I've been touched by a lot of things that I've read and things I've heard you say. So you got to keep going for everybody else. No?
Well, you're incredibly gracious, and I feel the same way about your page. I'm a huge fan, and that's what we need to do, right? As humans, is, and it's not always easy, but putting ourselves out there allows for that connection, right? Allows for that safe space, and the business thing that I'm working on is. It's an extension of the podcast. But it's a much bigger, much more sort of community focused thing that sort of serves the idea that you're talking about, is creating the space where we can connect and the space where we can heal together and learn from each other. And that is the greatest part in my mind. That's the greatest part of living is those interactions.
Yes. Can I give an amen?
Amen.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I love that. Yeah, love that.
Well, let's start with an emotional check-in, Dene. How are you doing right now? How's the week been?
Right now I'm feeling all of the feels. I feel like the excitement, the little bit of nervousness anytime, you do something that's new and exciting for you. I think there's
Sure.
that combination of, yes, this is exciting and I'm excited to do it, but talking about yourself. I'm an extremely introverted person, so I think anytime I sort of am talking about myself, there's that little bit of a rumble that happens for me in my tummy. But it's something I've learned to lean into getting more comfortable with over time. And practice getting more comfortable with over and over.
I relate to
that. Yeah, but this week has been good. It's been busy. I am, as you mentioned, I'm an associate marriage and family therapist here in Los Angeles in the Venice area. And the week before last, I was out of town facilitating my first yoga retreat and sort of therapy processing retreat. It was a combination of the two in Mexico, and it was the most amazing experience. And just, I don't know, maybe talk about it a little later, but it was an incredible experience. But then you kind of, come back down to earth and the return, and there's all the kinds of, things that need to be done when you take off for a weekend.
Laundry. Or
exactly.
cleaning the house, boring things like that.
Yes, I think Jack Kornfield's book After the Ecstasy, the Laundry was really present for me this week. There's a lot to get done. So it's nice to have this, I was just telling you it's raining out. I'm sitting here with some tea, excited to talk to you and just kind of settling in for a lazy Saturday after a busy week.
First of all, congrats on the yoga retreat. Is that something you created, or you're just part of it, or you're leading? Give me more details. I'm curious.
Yeah. So I was a facilitator. I've done a yoga retreat with, another yoga teacher friend of mine in the past, but this was sort of the first time that it was a creation that was all, what I wanted to create, a company called Yoga Manzanillo that has estates in Manzanillo, Mexico, invited me to come, and they said, kind of do whatever you want and invite, people to come join you. And so it was really, really just an opportunity for me to start to put together some of the things that I do in terms of therapy and processing work, group processing, and sort of integrate that with the practice of yoga and somatic healing and journaling and, just sharing. And it was, as I think is always the case, it was synchronistically all the people that needed to be there together for that week kind of came together. It was a group of 6 women and me, and they were all sort of in a really similar space in their lives and really connected, and it ended up just being such a powerful healing week for all of us. And, I just felt so unbelievably grateful to have the opportunity to do it and, excited to do more. And it felt like I was like workshopping something that I've wanted to do for a really long time. And it kind of came to fruition, and it was amazing.
That's incredible.
Thank you.
That's so cool. So I was talking to my friend Becky the other day, and I mentioned that I had never been on a retreat before, and she's like, "Known? What are you doing?" Because I like that type of atmosphere. Like you hear about, like I'm recording with Jen Pasteloff. In December,
fan of her as well. Yeah,
and she does these huge retreats like all over the world, and you just hear about like what you're talking about, what you're describing is just like this unparalleled connection and beauty, that's this shared human experience. And every time I hear about people describing their retreat experiences, I'm just like, gosh, I really need to get on that.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like it's just such a unique way to like really be with each other in such a present way in a time when we're all so not connected and not sort of grounded in being with each other in a really present way. So it's really nice to have space to do that.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to say it because this will be out by the time I've sort of announced my thing. One part of this business I'm creating, and it's called the Feely Human Collective.
I love that.
Thanks. And one part of it is, I'm starting small because it's just me, but one piece of it is online workshops. That eventually I'd like to take into businesses and schools, and eventually do retreats and things like that, and so Maybe let's talk after this to see if maybe you're interested in leading a workshop for the Feeling Human Collective, or because the mission of the business is to promote and instill empathy, vulnerability, and emotional wayfinding as sort of the core tenets of the human experience, recovery, wellness, healing, mental health, all those things. And, I'm creating the idea of it is this collaborative, collective environment where people come together and write for this curated journal and contribute by leading workshops and taking workshops. And it starts small online, and then eventually I'd like to take it, in person, do a live storytelling series, empathy focused, all these big ideas I have. But
Wow.
I only bring that up because I think, hearing about your retreat experience, like I want to create that thing, and allow just more of that, more and more of that,
Beautiful. I love that. Yeah, my face hurts from smiling right now. That's amazing. That's so great. I would love to be a part of that in any way that I could. That sounds amazing.
Cool. Well, we'll talk a little after, because I got lots to say.
Great.
So I wanted to just give a little update on my end. I take an antidepressant called Vibrid, and I feel lately I've been having it feels like I've sort of plateaued, and my depression has been not very stable, and I think it's related to just kind of the discomfort of working on a new thing and all that stuff. But I also am someone who likes to drink wine and a decent amount of it, probably too much at times. But I'm also, a little bit of a, I like chaos. Chaos is fun. And I feel like we only have one shot, so enjoy yourself. Anyways, I'm getting a little fatalistic. All that to say that I've decided to not drink for a while to see if that affects my depression, because obviously alcohol is a depressant.
Yeah.
And it's been a week. It's been okay so far. So we'll see.
Okay. What are you noticing in terms of how you feel so far?
Good question. I still feel a bit of pallor from the depression sort of hanging over me, and some anxiety, and but it's only been a week. I think generally speaking, it's maybe a good idea to just stop drinking for a spell, just as a way to detox. So we'll see. I mean, I have thoughts about it. I feel like on one hand, I think it's a good idea. On another hand, I feel like maybe I should just go to the psychiatrist and up my dosage or try a different med. But, I've been through that rigmarole, and that's exhausting. So I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I think I sort of applaud your wanting to notice what comes up without it and see how it feels. I'm sure we'll talk about it a little bit more, but I'm a sober woman. I have been for like 9 years, and
Okay.
I definitely feel that in early sobriety, I kind of would have a lot of ebbs and flows, and a lot of times I would struggle when I would try to stop using drugs and alcohol, and feel like my depression would sort of feel overwhelming. And I think that some of that is a little bit of, for me, it was a little bit of, a leveling off of my brain chemistry that had to happen.
Sure.
A lot of, like self-medicating for years, and then sort of my brain sort of needed to figure out where it was. So I think it is always a good thing when we sort of take a step back, like you're talking about, and sort of notice what comes up without any sort of outside, what I like to call a release valve, if we're using sort of any sort of substance to not feel what comes up that feels uncomfortable, we sort of don't know what the authentic feelings are without it.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
And it's like an artificial release valve.
Yes.
And
absolutely.
I think, that's great and well said. I think it's a good lesson generally to take a step back and look at things and sit with them. We have a tendency as humans to go and medicate and sort of ride the fumes of living rather than sort of recognizing what we're feeling and sitting in them and sort of being curious about that for a bit.
100%. I cannot agree more.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that empathy. I appreciate that. Let's delve into your story.
Okay.
And you as a aforementioned avid fan of You Me Empathy, you know where I'm going next, which is let's start with a couple seminal moments of your mental health journey you want to share.
My mental health journey. It's funny because as I listen to your podcast, I always think about this and now that it's upon me, I'm like, what should that be? I think for me, what was really sort of pivotal in my development, and I sort of think what I have struggled with and now sort of view as my strengths as a mental health professional in terms of empathy and in terms of sort of really being able to drop into those spaces of depth with people, really have a lot to do with the way I grew up. And that was that I grew up in Omaha, Nebraska, and I am a Black woman. I was a woman of color there at a time. I think it's a lot more diverse now in Omaha, Nebraska, but when I grew up there, it wasn't. I was kind of the diversity, me and my brother.
I remember going to Nebraska when I was 9 or 10. So this would have been, very early 90s. I went for like a cross country meet and we ran in the snow. And I remember it being very white, not just the snow, just, the people.
Absolutely. Yes. So it was very white when I was there growing up. And, I just remember really being uncomfortable with that. It felt really important for me to fit in and to sort of make people forget that I was different at a time when Omaha was so white. I remember sort of that I would go with my friends to places where people had kind of never seen a Black person before and people would really be staring at me. And I was very sort of like, whoa. So, just early memories were sort of that I wanted to make people forget that I was different. I really wanted to fit in. And I think that sort of became a real pivotal part of my childhood. I remember that, when I was young, I rode horses and I really loved animals, and horses were a lot of what I spent my childhood doing. And I went to a horse show with a good friend of mine once, and I remember her saying something to me about her mom and, saying, I can't believe my mom is spending so much time around your mom and that she's so nice to you. And I was like, really? Why? And she's like, because my mom hates Black people. And I remember just being like devastated. This was like a friend that I loved. I thought her mom really loved me. And I just had such a moment of shut down and internalizing that there was something wrong or bad with me. And I remember that I went and talked to my mom about it when we got home from that horse show. And she said, Dene, some people have grown up with a lot of stereotypes about what Black people are and what that looks like. And sometimes that makes them afraid. And so what we have to do is just sort of show them that all of the things that they've been taught, those stereotypes aren't true. And so I sort of took from that, if I'm going to be different, if I'm going to be a Black girl amongst this completely white community, then I need to be perfect. I need to be the best version. I need to make everyone like me. I need to people please. I need to fit in. I need to do whatever it is so that people can forget about the fact that I'm Black. And that was sort of, what I did.
That's a lot. That's taking a lot on your shoulders.
Yeah, thank you for, I don't think I even kind of recognize what that was for someone that young to take on, but it was, now that you say it that way.
What did that look like?
I think it was just very really needed to be popular, really needed to do whatever all the other kids were doing. You know, as I got older, that sort of was like what kids did was they partied and they drank. And so I was always going to be the one like facilitating us getting fake IDs and buying the beer and figuring it out. And so, you know, I definitely now as I am older, I understand about myself that I am just like, and I think always was a very introverted person and very sort of needed to be alone a lot and recharge. But I kind of felt like I had to fight against that. I think, you know, culturally and generally, culturally in general, I think that extroversion is sort of rewarded. And we're sort of taught to feel like we should be outgoing, you know, life of the party people, and people that sort of like really need that time to recharge their battery and be alone. And I think there's so many gifts about being an introvert now, but I didn't see it that way when I was younger. And so I think I really fought against what was my nature. And I think for me, you know, the partying, the doing whatever I needed to do to fit in became a big part of that. And as I got older, that sort of, you know, was, as long as I was like at the party with several drinks, I was good and I was comfortable. And, you know, sort of circling back to what we were talking about before, I always like to say to people, if you're not really sure if, you know, drugs or alcohol are a problem in your life, take them away. It becomes clear pretty quickly if it's a problem or not. And for me, without drugs and alcohol, I was uncomfortable. You know, I was very sort of self-conscious. I was, constantly feeling judged or that there was something wrong with me. I remember sort of having that narrative from a very young age that something was off. And if people ever really knew me, that they wouldn't like me or that they wouldn't love me. And so I sort of needed to do a lot to compensate for that in my mind. Yeah.
So it's almost like you were existing as a self that wasn't entirely you.
Yes,
right?
That really resonates. I think I got very comfortable with sort of different personas, and I think that I needed to do whatever I needed to do to fit in with the group that I was in, you know. So I didn't really have a sense of self as I look back at that period of my life. It was just sort of, who do you need me to be? I'll be that, you know. And I definitely I think through high school, that sort of looked like fitting in with parties. As I went to college, I think that became about, you know, getting attention from guys, and sort of how that manifested for me was like I became really hypercritical of my body and developed some disordered eating around that, and sort of just kind of got like hyper focused on exercise and restricting. And, you know, I think I would like drink my calories instead of actually eating food a lot of the time. And so just like really, really self-destructive, unhealthy behaviors in my earlier years.
You know, when you were growing up in Nebraska, you know, during high school, did you talk to your family about the stuff that you were feeling?
You know, I did. And I think my parents did the best that they could to understand. But I think it was a little bit, you know, they were super focused on making a living and survival, and sort of, you know, hadn't really experienced what it felt like to be the only Black kid in a completely white environment. So, you know, they would sort of tell me what they thought I needed to hear, which was sort of like, you know, just ignore them, or that's what's wrong with them, not what's wrong with you, that type of thing. But, you know, at that sort of developmental stage, like your peers are everything. You just want to be like everybody else. You just want to fit in. And so it felt like it was hard for them to really empathize with what I was going through.
Right, right.
Yeah.
I so relate to the idea of living a life that's not entirely you. Because I did that for a while, and sort of being the, I'm like you, I'm very introverted. I'm also, to a fault, and I've had to learn to create boundaries around this, to a fault, a people pleaser. Yeah. So I did that to a point where it sort of destroyed me. Like, and it was, and I put all of my effort and attention and sort of understanding to external people and to people in my world, and trying to create friendships, and feeling like always somehow feeling let down and feeling hurt. I always got, especially through high school, and because of that, I didn't have any sense of self like you, like, so, and that could be such a, for me, it was such a destructive place, like, because when we're not tethered to, and we're not learning about ourselves in how we operate in the world and how we operate relationally, like, it can be such a feeling of chaos. And for me, and maybe I wonder if you can relate to this, for me, that's how my eating disorder started, is feeling just not seen and feeling so out of control, and then, finding some sort of sense of control in my anorexia.
Absolutely. I love that you sort of describe that feeling of chaos, because I think that is what it was for me. And I think so often what eating disorders are about is really not about the habit or the restricting or whatever, however it manifests, but it's really about sort of some way to gain a semblance of control when life feels out of control. And when you aren't sort of grounded in a sense of self, or in something that you can feel rooted in, it's, I can control this. I can channel that in this direction. Yeah, absolutely. Really relate to that.
So what did your eating disorder look like through college, and how did you deal with it?
Yeah, it was just, a little bit of everything. It certainly started out with like exercising to an extreme, where I was just like, counting every calorie and like determined to burn it off running. And then, I think it got to the point where I did a lot of like continuing to party. And so, like when you've been out drinking all night, sometimes what that looks like as a college kid is everybody goes out for pizza afterward. And so sometimes that would be, purging food as well. But I think for me, most of it was sort of definitely for a really long time had an unhealthy relationship with running, which feels, weird to say, but it was like a fighting against myself. Like running was almost a punishment. Like you've eaten and now you have to run to like burn all of those calories that you ate. Right. And you're not getting off of this treadmill or whatever it is until you've done that. So, just early relationships with exercise were just really destructive. I still like kind of look back at that time and feel sad for that girl that I was when I think back at her, and I always think back sometimes about like people that probably saw me on that treadmill, knowing that there was something wrong, because it was very evident that it wasn't a normal way to be exercising.
Yeah. I definitely abused running during my period of time, and I think like I didn't like in the top of my brain, I don't think, looking back, it was about like, oh, you ate this, you need to burn off this. It was more of the wanting to drown out the emotional pain with physical pain. And you know what's interesting about all of this is, like, I know, and I wonder if you can relate to this. Like, I love to run, and I'm 38. I have chronic pain. I have hip issues, but I still love to run, and I've learned to have to like pare down my running and sort of look at it in a more sort of peaceful, sort of holistic way.
Yes.
But at the same time, like, we can take this thing, running, and it could be, on one side of it, destructive, right? And damaging and unhealthy. On the other side of it, healing and growth and strength and nourishment, right? And that I would say we can say the same thing about anything in our lives. Yes. It's really about, approaching it in the right way and looking at it, looking at the whole thing, looking at the whole picture,
Yes, absolutely. I agree with that so deeply. Gabor Mate is someone who I really love and respect his work and, the things that he talks about in terms of addiction. And he says that, everything on face value can be addictive and nothing addictive, so it's sort of really about the energy and the relationship that you bring into that space. And, similar to what you're talking about, my relationship with running is so different today. And it's a space that I can really sort of use to nourish myself. And it becomes sort of a meditative space to be by myself. And, I do what feels good and I let go when I'm ready. And it's just amazing how something that used to be a space of harm can be really where you go to fill yourself up when the relationship changes,
Yeah. That's so great that you've gotten there.
Mm.
And how have you been able to get there?
Oh, a journey. So, what ended up happening, I'll sort of try to give the shorter version of that, relationship with eating, was that I think I got to a point where I was just losing so much weight and wasting away a little bit, to the point that, my best friend at the time, and this was after college. I think this was, I moved to Chicago after college and was sort of working there, but some of that behavior continued. And my girlfriend got to a point where she was like, you're not eating, and I'm starting to get scared. And if you don't call your mom and tell her what's going on, I'm going to. And so I ended up telling my mom what's going on. She, initially like really freaked out and was like, you're coming back to Nebraska and you're going to enter some sort of treatment. I think I went into treatment for like a day and I was like, I'm not doing this. And she was like, well, you're going to do some sort of something. And so we compromised on me finding a therapist in Chicago. And that was sort of my first relationship with a therapist, which, I always like to say that every little bit of work that we do in therapy is like planting seeds, but that first therapeutic relationship was, the start of a powerful shift for me. I wouldn't say that was like the space where I found healing and real shift, but it was like the first little planting of some seeds that started to make me think about, what you're talking about, what was motivating my behavior versus sort of just like people pleasing or going on autopilot or needing to fit in. I started to like bring in some questioning of why and what's this about, and that for me was really powerful. And so, I used to do this thing where I would get uncomfortable and I would move. I would decide a new city was the solution I needed. And so from Chicago, I sort of abruptly moved to New York. And I should backtrack a little bit and just say that, I always would sort of drink socially and kind of had a relationship with alcohol where that was just sort of like a constant. I probably drank a lot of wine at night, but I never would have really considered that, problematic behavior or that, it was anything different than what most of my friends were doing. Mm-hmm. What did happen for me, and this was a little bit around when I started to let go of disordered eating, was that I started to develop a relationship with pot, with marijuana, mm-hmm. that ended up sort of, you hear about like cross addictions or how people sort of shift from one addictive behavior to another.
Right.
And for me, pot really became the thing that replaced that. And it was like all of the discomfort I had felt in my skin my entire life. Suddenly when I started smoking pot, it was like I had an armor that protected me and I didn't care anymore. I didn't care what you thought of me. I didn't care about society's expectations of me. I felt like I had been liberated and this is what I had been looking for my whole life. So that became sort of a love affair for me. And in my relationship with pot, I really sort of went internal. I sort of lived in a privately defined world, and I really kind of cut off a lot of the relationships, the work that I did. And, that was when I was living in Chicago that I first started that relationship with pot. And then from there, I moved to New York, and that really continued and became kind of all encompassing. Like I would do what I needed to do in terms of jobs to get by. I would like cocktail or wait tables. But I did just enough that I could just kind of stay stoned all the time, like all the time. So that kind of became my new normal. And that continued for a lot of years. I met my husband in New York while I was just like consistently stoned. And it was, the way that I smoked pot was, it was sort of like a secret. I sort of didn't let everyone know the extent to which I was a stoner. I did a lot to hide it. So I, seemed really functional to everyone else. And I was pretty good at it for a really long time.
Did you feel shame about it?
Oh my gosh, yes. So much. Shame was like my bud. Like we were very well acquainted with one another. A lot of shame, a lot of, that there's something wrong with me, but this is what I need to do to feel normal. And I think that anytime there's secrets, there's shame that comes along with that, So yeah, absolutely. Felt so much shame, and shame about the way that I would hide it from people that I cared about, and the way that it would show up in our relationships, or I would not show up in our relationships with people I cared about, because I was sort of preoccupied with this drug that became the center of my universe.
Yeah. You're isolating yourself.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So when you met your husband in New York, did that start to change, or was that a sort of strong piece of the puzzle toward getting sober?
Not at first. It was eventually. The other thing that I sort of picked up that I should mention in New York was that I found yoga, which for me, even in the midst of getting high all the time, there was something that was sort of happening for me on a chemical level, certainly on a spiritual level, where I would find peace while I was doing yoga. I would feel the most at peace in my skin that I'd ever felt. I felt more embodied, in my body than I'd ever felt when I did yoga. So that was sort of the time that I would feel a little bit normal. And I kind of, that started to be a little bit of the catalyst for me to start thinking about, maybe I don't want to do this forever. And this isolating forever, this, way of being in the world forever. Yeah. And then certainly my relationship with my husband as that, we got married and I was still sort of in that space, but over time it became more and more clear to him that, the way that I got high was problematic. And, he reached a point where he was like, you're not really in a relationship with me. You're kind of in a relationship with a drug. And I didn't really have an argument. I kind of was like, yeah, you're right. And I wouldn't really want to be in a relationship with me either. And I hated the way that felt. And, from there just decided I don't want to be this person that feels this level of shame about who I am, and I was kind of watching everyone else's lives going on around me, but I was sort of staying stuck. One of my friends says that like potheads, they don't really have a bottom. They just like have a buoy. They're just like in the water, hanging out, not going anywhere with their lives, not doing anything. And that was me, like I just wasn't doing anything. I would do just enough to live, but it wasn't living. And so I reached out to a friend that had been sober for a lot of years. And I kind of asked him, I was like, if I thought that I had a problem with drugs, like what would I do with that? I didn't know. And he introduced me to the woman who became my sponsor, who's just like the Dalai Lama of sponsors. I like to say she's an angel walking around on this earth, and my life changed. I got introduced to 12-step work, which I like to say now is, I understand now as just like a form of cognitive behavioral therapy. It's sort of retraining the brain to have a different first response to things. Right. And, I think that I sort of understand drugs and alcohol as a tool to sort of deal with problems that we don't know how to deal with, or we don't have the tools to deal with another way. Which for so many of us is feeling uncomfortable feelings, that we don't really know how to feel. We don't sort of come to this earth with like a guidebook of like, here's what you do when, you experience trauma. Like we don't know what to do with these things. And so we need some place to, or some way to cope with the things that feel like we're not able to cope with them. And for a long time, that was how I used pot. But I learned new tools, and I learned another way of doing things.
That's amazing, and kudos.
Thank you.
You wrote recently, speaking on this topic of discomfort, and sort of getting used to that. And I think it's an important thing to get used to. You wrote on your blog recently about your son transitioning away from his pacifier.
Yes.
Can you tell me and the listeners a little bit about that experience?
Sure. Yeah. I think that I have a 2.5-year-old who I like to say is like the most profound teacher I have ever had, will ever have in my life. And I think so much of that comes from, what is so difficult for us to, as parents, watch our children do is feel discomfort and not fix it. Right. But as we allow our children to feel discomfort, we teach them that discomfort will not kill you. And I think that for me was the most powerful lesson that I learned that completely changed my life when I got sober, was that emotions will actually never kill you, that they will be awful for a while. And I like to, when working with clients, almost describe it like a wave of discomfort that comes over you and you feel like you're drowning and you feel like you can't breathe and you feel like it will never end, and then it's gone. And you are now aware of what you're capable of riding because you rode that wave and it's gone. And, I think it's a lot of this you can sort of understand on an intellectual level, but when you have your child in front of you suffering in such a way that they feel like they're not going to survive it, like you're watching them actually suffering, and that you could make the suffering go away in an instant. And every part of you on a like visceral cellular level wants to do that for them. But then at some point they got to feel it. I think my mom used to say, you can feel this now or you can feel it later, but at some point you're going to have to feel this. And that's kind of what it was like with my son with the pacifier. We kind of knew at some point we're going to have to let this go. And when we do, it's going to be awful. And it was awful. It was literally like he looked like someone going through heroin withdrawal. It was, convulsing and freaking out and hitting and screaming and throbbing and punching and just horrible, And I read something in a parenting book that I was like, God, this is so powerful about life in general, which is I can't fix it, but I can go through it with you. And I think that if we can sort of offer that to our children, I think that is one of the most powerful things that creates healing in therapy is, there are things that, cannot be fixed, but having someone else be present with you through the discomfort really makes us feel like, just a reminder that we are not alone on this journey, which there's so much comfort in,
Yeah. That's beautiful.
And I think it's powerful. And eventually the wave passed, and he slept through the night without a pacifier after a couple nights, but was it a doozy?
I bring it up just because it's just such a fraught moment, there's so much in it that like we can learn from. Because, I do talk about this a lot on the podcast is discomfort is, as much as we don't like it, it's part of life. It's part of the growth process. It's part of, like, it's like when you scrape your knee, right? And there's this healing part that's like uncomfortable and itchy, and you have to like not scratch at it or it's going to bleed and scar, like it's part of growing. It's part of like the caterpillar becoming the butterfly. It's like this crusty, uncomfortable, flailing, that's like what life is. And maybe my question to you is like, how do we as humans become more resilient to discomfort?
I love that question. And I actually really love the image that you use of the scabbing of your knee, because we've all, can really bring that back on a visceral level, that feeling of like, I just want to scratch it. I just want to make this pain go away. And
I've had poison oak. And that is, come on, talk about like an itchy nightmare.
Yes. Yeah. But, I think that's such a powerful metaphor for what we do as a culture. We scratch the itch, we make it go away. And we sort of have been conditioned to like gratify ourselves instantly, to not feel anything, to not let ourselves even just like be with ourselves, you know. So much of what I think I have found really a lot of healing in terms of mindfulness work is can I be curious about the feeling rather than making it go away? Can I stay in it, notice it? Like, even if you think about that skinned knee, can I get really curious about the sensations? What does it feel like for it to itch? You know, get in there, notice it. What does an itch feel like? If I had to describe it, what would that description be? You know, if I had to like put words to it, what other sensations do I notice in my body as I start to feel that? Am I feeling hot? Am I feeling discomfort on my neck? Am I feeling sweat coming up? You know, just really starting to get curious about every detail of the experience. And as we do something else, stay in our mind and start to explore what's coming up versus making the discomfort go away. A lot of times we'll notice that as we stop resisting, which is what we're doing as we get curious, the feeling is almost past a lot of times as we stay in the curiosity.
Yeah, it's like resisting it is just making it worse.
Exactly.
It's resisting the inevitable.
Yeah, I think so much of our suffering comes from, I want what this is not to be what it is.
Right.
But it is what it is, you know? So can we get into the space of surrender? Can we allow what is to be what it is and notice what is coming up as I surrender into this versus fighting against it? You know, I think the longer we fight, the more difficult it becomes. I think, you know, there was this point in the story that you were asking me about with my son and the pacifier. And, you know, like he was in my bed at one point, just like thrashing. And all of a sudden it was just like, and he just like surrendered to this, what it is. And it was like the wave had passed, you know, like, I'm going to stop the fight. I give, you know, I'm done. I surrender to, this is not going to change. And it was like he had peace, but he had to let go of the fight against what was.
I love that. I love the word surrender because, as I say all too often on this show, it's we as humans like to preconceive of how things will be, right? We like to think of things linearly. We like to just kind of preordain things, right? And the reality is that's not how life works, you know, and surrendering to a little bit of knowing that life is a little bit of chaos and riding that wave, as you put it, like is where we're gonna get through that discomfort. Because holding on to a thing that's really not based in reality is just gonna cause us more grief and pain and a stagnance, really, lack of emotional growth.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it comes back to control again so much of the time, you know? Like what we were talking about with the eating disorders, I think like feeling out of control is so much of, you know, the experience of being human, because ultimately we are not in control. You know, any control that we feel like we have is really an illusion. You know, I like the image of like, if you are in control of the universe, go to the ocean and make it stop. You can't? Oh, wait, why can't you? You're in control. No, you're not. You're not in control. You know, there's so much that is out of our control, but the illusion of control gives us a sensation of peace, right? So we do all of these things to make us feel like we're in control. But really, when we surrender to the idea that none of this is in our control, we're just all sort of along for the ride. I love Elizabeth Lesser says we're all like bozos on the bus, just along for the ride of this experience of being human and you're like sort of gathering up what we need along the way. But it is not us actually that's in control.
Yeah, no, I mean, of course, I agree with all of that. Not that you need my agreement, but it's it's like I struggle with this because I come from, like, I grew up in a Christian home, and it was very sort of, you know, conservative Christian, very kind of like narrow minded, and I frankly believe very inclusive and not very aligned with the way I look at the world. And in that is such in a lot of frames of thinking, let's just put aside religion, in a lot of frames of thinking, there is such a need for like painting the world in a way that's not reflective of reality. And I'm not disparaging religion. I think there's a lot of beauty in it, but I think it can be troubling when it's used as a tool to create paths that aren't there, to create sort of binary ways of looking at things, to create perspectives that have no sense of external forces, right? Or anything outside of this one frame of thinking, right? And that's the thing I struggle with the most is like there's so much of that. Not even in just religion, there's just so much of holding on to that leads to, I feel, that leads to so much exclusion, that leads to so much heartache and so much separation of family and grief and just loss, right? It troubles me.
Yeah, I completely agree with what you're saying. And, I would also just maybe add that I think that I agree with you. I think religions to me are like these beautiful expressions of this need that we have had as humans, like from the beginning, to understand, to know where we come from, and to have a story that we can sort of hold on to, because it gives us a sense of control, that somehow we know something that I feel nobody really knows. I think if you look at all of the different religious texts, what is so beautiful is how similar they are to me, that from the beginning, people have sort of been looking for a way to understand through these stories, but all the stories are actually at their core really similar. And, I had a teacher, Saul David Ray, who used to say, to define God is to deny God, meaning that if you believe that God is omnipresent, everything, created everything, and our little like human brains can probably comprehend 3% of what that means, then if you try to label that, if you try to put a stamp on this is what it is, it's like you're denying all of what that is, that huge, massive, powerful entity that cannot be labeled. And so I feel like I'm certainly a spiritual person, but I understand the beauty of religions, and that it's like these, these texts, like so often like poetic expressions of ways that we have had as humans this real need to know, even if we don't, Yeah. I don't think that anybody really does.
Yeah. And I think that's a fair and gentle way to describe, that seeking, because you're right. We're all kind of seeking information and answers, but I do think that there is so much more fruit and learning in the surrendering, as opposed to not the seeking, it's the trying to make sense, right? Like, because there's so much that doesn't make sense and won't make sense. And instead, I feel like instead of trying to make sense, it's more about, instead of projecting outward, we need to be doing more projecting inward. Does that make sense?
That does. I love that. And sort of like, I love it in the context of seeking and, wanting to know more and understand more, versus sort of like being closed off to the possibility of more answers, right? So like, I like to stay in the space of skepticism. Like I want to be curious, and I want to know, and I want to like try to understand always, but I don't ever want to be cynical and like close myself off to another point of view, or, hearing why someone believes what they believe that might be different from what I believe.
Yeah.
And I think there's a little bit too much of that happening. Like we're a little in the space of like, I'm going to stay in the boundaries of what I believe, and I'm going to be cynical around anything that's outside of that box.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Another sort of thing that you talk about, on your website, on your social media is finding peace in ourselves. What is, for you, what does that look like, and how do you describe that to others?
Good question. I think that peace for me was something that was so elusive for so long. And I think that I sort of think of peace for me today as a little bit of what we're talking about. I find peace in the fact that I don't know, that that there is no sort of like period at the end of the sentence, that I think of this life as like this journey that I'm here in, sort of what I like to look at as like a life school. So I'm here to learn, I'm here to gather up the lessons that I need to gather up for this lifetime, but I'm not supposed to have it figured out, right? Like, I think that the idea of like perfect means that we're done somehow, or that we've like mastered this. And I don't think that's, if you've mastered life, then you're done, then life is over. I think that if, instead of sort of looking at these experiences as like the really difficult moments that inevitably will continue to come up for us as we're living, if we sort of are able to say, instead of why is this happening to me, what is this here to teach me? What is this here for? I find a lot of peace in that, and that somehow I'm held in the space of all of this is for me. All of this is a part of my life school, and I'm gathering up more information. And I somehow, when I think of peace, it's just that I came to an understanding of that for myself, and I stopped sort of struggling against what is and struggling against myself, making myself wrong for the ways that I had struggled, and sort of, that I get to be human, and that gives me a lot of peace, which I feel like you talk about a lot, and I love, that I have permission to just be human and struggling along, and I'm gonna fall short and I'm gonna make mistakes, and that's all okay, because that's what I'm here to do, is actually struggle,
I love that. Like, it's like we're all in this big pot of soup together, and sometimes we're perched atop these little pieces of carrot, and sometimes we're flailing about in vegetable stock, and it's some of it nourishes us, and some of it hurts because it's hot, maybe, or we're allergic to bell peppers, whatever. It's just part of us sort of mashing about.
Yes, I love that.
I may be hungry.
Are you hungry? Okay. See, it's not raining there. It feels like today's a good day for soup.
Yeah, it does, for sure. Well, it's fall, and fall in Southern California although it's even though it's been hot during the day, it's been dipping down into the low 40s here at night, which is
right.
Great.
Yeah, it's feeling a little wintry-ish at night. It's nice. I like it. Yeah.
One of the things you had mentioned before, briefly, I think you just used the term once, is somatic movement. Help me understand what that is.
Yeah. So, all of the experiences that we have throughout our life, we sort of, it's so funny because I was talking about this a little bit on our retreat, and I'm sort of digressing for a second, but the reason I do is because I feel like so often what is happening culturally, as we are working, as we are continuing to do instead of be, is that we are not feeling feelings, right? So I think what happens, and I hear a lot of people talking about the different ways that they're doing it, and they'll say things lately, like, I feel like a word that I'm hearing come up constantly is compartmentalize, right? So I just sort of compartmentalize that, and I just like, and so I really was getting into that on the retreat. I was like, well, talk to me about what compartmentalizing means for you. And basically what it means is to not feel what I'm feeling, right? Like, I don't give myself space for that. I don't have time for that. I got to keep going. And so I started to get curious about, okay, so then where does the feeling go when you don't feel it? And, everyone was sort of dumbfounded. And I'm like, so it's held in your body. Our body holds on to things. There's this beautiful book called The Body Keeps the Score that talks about...
Yes, it's like Yumi Empathy's #1 favorite book. And in fact, I call him Bessie. Because he's like just my regular pal. And my friend Tony, who's also a therapist, has been on the show a few times.
Yeah, I heard him.
He recently got to sit down to have dinner with him and a couple other therapists.
Oh, wow.
And he said it was amazing. Anyways.
That's so cool. Yeah. And so basically, as we push things down, our body is holding all of that, all of the fear, all of the anxiety, all of the hurt, all the trauma, all of the feelings that we don't allow ourselves to feel. Our body is holding all of that in. Right. And so a lot of times I really like to think of the feelings like anxiety that a lot of clients will come in to talk to me about, I'm feeling this anxiety and I need to make it go away. And I'm like, okay, well, instead of just like, let's demolish it, get it out of here, why don't we maybe invite it in and say, sit down for a second, anxiety. What do you want me to know? What's going on that I need to be aware of that maybe I have been unwilling to feel. I think that as we push down all of these feelings, they are still within us, rumbling about and getting really, really agitated that we're not giving them the space to be felt. And so I think for me, when I think of, somatic movement starts to be like on an actual like movement level, starting to let some of that energy channel and get out and move through us. For me, I think that yoga was my first experience of somatic therapy because so much of what I had been doing to my body and really traumatizing my body with for years, I started to feel come up. I remember within the first 10 sessions of yoga, when we would finally be still at the end, I would just start sobbing, and it was like,
wow.
What the hell is going on? Why am I having such a, why am I crying? But it was that so much was coming up and finally being able to be released as I was breathing in my body and I was starting to move around this energy in a conscious way. And so, so a lot of the work that I do with clients and definitely in yoga is to start to bring awareness into, can we allow space for the feelings that we've been holding down to be felt? I like to talk to clients a lot about like, if you had a big beach ball and you imagine like your feelings as a beach ball that you were like holding underwater, like you could do that for a while. It would take a lot of energy and you could like maybe use your whole body to hold that beach ball under the surface of the water for a long time, but it would be hard and it would be agitating and, you wouldn't be able to focus on a lot else. And then finally, when those feelings, that beach ball came up, it's like whoosh, out of the water, right? It's like, whoa. And I think that's what's happening a lot of times when we're feeling the feelings that we don't allow ourselves to feel because we've been compartmentalizing or we've been sort of holding feelings down.
Oh, that's so great. I love the analogy of the beach ball in the water. That's really, because we've all done that, held the beach ball down in the water. And I love the idea of this. Obviously, I'm a huge fan of the book, The Body Keeps a Score. And if listeners, you haven't read that yet, do yourself a favor. Go pick up a copy. It's amazing. And it's, to hear you say that, Dene, is such a good reminder for all of us that there's a connection between our emotions, our anxieties, whatever, and our physical bodies.
Yeah.
And I think we forget that. Like, I think we arrogantly think that, like, maybe not arrogantly, we just think we have this misconception that, we'll just put it over here and it's not going to impact our physical bodies. And there's so much evidence to show that, like, yes, like we hold this here and we're holding it in our bodies and it's going to manifest as pain, as whatever it may be. And I think it's I love to hear you say that because it's such a good reminder that emotional pain is connected to your physical pain. They're all connected. It's all one unit working together.
Yeah, absolutely. I like to say a lot of the times that we are not robots, like we don't actually...
We're not?
We kind of expect ourselves to be, I think, but we are human, feely beings in the words of known, but...
very fallible.
Yes, but that, we sort of expect, why am I still struggling with this? Or why is this hard? And it's because, when we don't allow ourselves to have a reaction to things that hurt us or that, need to be felt, but we're not feeling, our body, our psyche is going to react to that eventually because we're not robots. We have to allow ourselves to feel the things that need to be felt. I used to have a therapist that would say, well, try not feeling what you feel. It's what you feel. The more that you shame yourself for feeling it, it doesn't change it. So maybe just invite yourself to feel it. And I remember feeling like, yeah, that's really true. I mean, we can fight against it forever, but it's kind of a losing battle.
Yeah. Feel the feels, everyone. Feel those feels. Feels
right.
good. I mean, it feels bad at times. I should say it's not good or bad. It just feels like, and there's so much in it. It's so rich. It's a rich experience. Feel those feels.
Yeah. I like to say, like, all feelings welcome. I think I say that with my little boy a lot, all of the feelings are good. Like, we don't decide that some feelings are not allowed to be felt and some feelings are great feelings and those are invited. No, all the feelings are welcome. Bring them all.
Yeah.
We can tolerate all of them.
Did you ever see the movie Inside Out? It was an animated Pixar feature.
Oh no, but I feel like the soundtrack was good. Like, I feel like I know the music from it.
Well, it's lovely, and I recently had a conversation. I actually wrote about it when it came out because it so impacted me. But it's all about how sort of all feelings are valid, right? And we need to look at them. And it's really a beautiful movie. And I recently had a conversation with the copacetic system. They are a collection of identities who have dissociative identity disorder, and they said Lydia, the core self, had said that Inside Out is one of the best movies that represents DID, which I was kind of blown away by as well. But I don't know. I think you should watch, and maybe you can watch it with your son someday because it is such a good, simplified look at, like, because there's anger, there's sadness, and there's all these sort of emotions, and it's so well done. I love it. It makes me happy.
Oh, I absolutely will. Thank you for telling me about it.
Sure. Can you tell me about, like, sort of where you are now in your practice, and specifically about, if you're open to it, about you being an African American woman and sort of working in the field of therapy and how that's been for you, and in particular in your relationship with your family and your extended family. Like, how has that experience been?
Yeah, well, thank you for asking that question. I really love that because what I think that you're speaking to is, or maybe you're speaking to, is the fact that, especially within the African American community, and I think so many communities, actually. Let me backtrack that.
And yes, that's what I'm speaking to.
Yes. But therapy is definitely something that is frowned upon. Therapy is something that someone is going to get in your head and shrink it and brainwash you. And you don't want to do that. You don't want to give someone access to your head. And, I think it's really important not only to be a voice that is sort of helping to dispel that myth, but also, I think be a space that people who feel like they go into communities where there's no one that looks like them, that can be really difficult for them to feel like they relate to their experience, to have more faces, more people talking about the experience of what it is to be an African American, and struggle, as we all do. And I think we need to be really honest about that. I think that's one of the things that pushes me to kind of, as we talked about, I'm a very introverted person, so maybe wouldn't write as much as I do about, how I struggle personally. But I think it's important that we do that. I think it's important that we all sort of normalize the fact that everybody struggles, and this is what I do with my struggle. What do you do with yours?
Are you saying especially as a therapist?
I do, and that's not always the. I think that is becoming more of a not popular. I think more and more therapists are starting to disclose a little bit more, not in the therapy rooms. Like, I certainly don't sit down with my clients and talk about my personal life and where I'm struggling, because that's their time.
Right.
But I do use, outlets like my blog or Instagram or outlets like this to sort of talk about myself and the ways that I've struggled in a more open way than I think conventionally therapists might have. And I think that that's important because I think humanizing therapists sort of makes the process of therapy feel a little bit more accessible, a little bit less scary. I'm still struck by how much people are just like, they will have anxiety for weeks before they come to see me. And so it's like, when someone has finally made the appointment to come, I know that a lot of times that can be a big deal. And I always want to sort of like normalize that this is a relationship, this is us getting to know each other. And I think that ends up being what is so healing about therapy, is just your experience of being human, being witnessed and affirmed by another human, like there's a lot of other aspects of it, but I think at its core, that is what therapy is, that ends up being so powerful. And it feels like the greatest privilege and honor of my life to be able to hold that space in the way that it was held for me. I never feel like I'm working. I always feel like I'm getting to be with another person in the way that I love. I love the depthy conversations. I went to a school for graduate school called Pacifica in Santa Barbara, and it's depth psychology, which is sort of, exploring like the depth of the experience. Like, what is this, like we talked about a little bit, but what is this experience of being human and the journey of it about in the big picture? So zooming outward, sort of like, what is this here for? And I love these conversations. Like, I would do this all day, every day. And I get to do it with people. Yeah, I feel that from you as I listen to you talk. So I think that it feels like such a privilege. And I think that there's just a hunger for more of that. And you can sort of see it with the ways that people are connecting in social media and online, that we're sort of, we're getting a little tired of the personas, of the facades, of the pretending that anybody's got it all together. Nobody's got it all together. Like I'm just always...
what is even that?
Right? Exactly. What does that even mean?
Yeah.
100%. It's like we imagine that somehow there's a bunch of Stepford wives surrounding us, but we're the only ones who are struggling with problems. And it's like, that's silly, Susan. Of course, we all are struggling with our own individual brand of struggle. And if we can just talk to each other about it in spaces like the one that you've created so beautifully, I think that there's just so much healing that comes from that. So thank you for doing the work that you do, Noam.
Oh, thanks, and likewise, my friend.
Thank you.
You mentioned a shift, and a positive shift, and sort of like relinquishing the control of these facades. Are you seeing that shift within the African American community?
I will say, I think, maybe slower. I think when I was saying what I was saying about like seeing a shift in it, I do think you're seeing like a lot more therapists on social media and a lot of their sort of like memes and things being spread around, and there being a lot of conversations like that.
Yeah.
I still think there's something about the faces that sometimes people make when I tell them I'm a therapist, like, ooh, like what conversation are you going to have with me? But I still think that there is a little bit of idea of what therapy is, or what it is to, to go in for therapy. A stigma. That's the word that was not coming to me. But there's still a little bit of a stigma, I think, especially in the African American community. I certainly, as much as I'm a therapist, but in my family still, it is like, oh, that's great that you do that for people who need that, but I would never,
Sure.
And I think I very much grew up with that. Like, but do you really, like, I think my mom will even still say, God bless her, like, do you really think you'll need to go to therapy forever? And she'll kind of like make a face as she says it. And I'm like, Mom, therapy is like a massage for me. Like, I love when I go.
I mean, I get to go to therapy.
Exactly.
I have the privilege.
And it is such a privilege. And thank you for saying that as well. I worked in community mental health for the first couple years of my practicum after school. And it is such a privilege to have access to mental health care, and not everybody does, and I think, my husband is Canadian. I think that one of the ways that we are really sort of failing ourselves and one another as a society is that we aren't prioritizing just space for that. There are places where everybody gets access to a therapist, and it's just like normal. Like, you want to go see a therapist, you go see a therapist. That's like part of your self-care. That's part of your health. And, it's encouraged. And I really would love and, feel really passionate about being a part of getting as much access to as many people as possible, because everybody should. It shouldn't be such a privilege. It should just be like something that people have when they need and would like to have someone to talk to.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree. And let me put it back on you. You are moving the needle in that front and sort of reducing the stigma and normalizing these conversations through, obviously how you show up with your patients, but also, with the writing you do, with the stuff you talk about on social media, like that stuff, while social media can be an awful sort of ego-led, debased existence, it can also be this beautiful connecting force and a place for enrichment, and you're part of that.
Oh, thank you so much for that, Noam. That means the world to me.
Oh, you're welcome.
I do think that, it's amazing the connections that I think sort of on a, I don't know, it feels like a little bit magical level it happens, because I remember being like really drawn to your page and starting to listen to your podcast and being like, I love this guy. And then when you reached out to ask me if I wanted to be on the podcast, it felt like a little wink from the universe. Like, like keep going and like keep connecting, because, you will get to connect with the people that you feel moved by. And I love those moments. That feels like magic.
It is magic. And I've had a lot of those moments myself. And it's just like I mentioned it. I've mentioned this on the show a few times, but like I think it's the great thing about being a human and connecting with others like yourself is we're instantly aware that we're mirrors for each other, and that is like when you find that, it like brings tears to my eyes, because it's such a like that there's a instant sort of connection, and there's no sort of obstacles to connect and learn and grow with each other, and that's the greatest gift that I've sort of received through doing this podcast and working on this other thing is that sort of connection and that growth that we can do together, not alone, right? Not apart. Is that it's in the togetherness that's where we can really make a difference.
Yes, love that so much.
Well, let's transition into Empathy Heroes. How does that sound?
Sure. Yeah. Great.
So, listeners, this is the part of the show where my guests and I each list an empathy hero in our lives. It could be someone from a book, a character. It could be someone, a friend, or even someone from history, a president or what have you. Maybe not a president. That's like certainly not the existing president. But I will go first to give you a moment to think, Dene.
Okay.
My empathy hero this week is a listener of the podcast and a supporter of the You Me Empathy Patreon page, which I continue to feel such shame about because I don't put that much effort into my Patreon. It's a thing I set up and I'm not doing much. So if you're a Patreon listener and you're listening now, especially you, Elise, I'm sorry for that. But Elise Landowski, you are my empathy hero this week because you've been, I guess, so gracious in your interaction with You Me Empathy online and your questions. And you've been so kind in your responses to my Instagram posts, and you just seem connected and beautiful. And you're all the way in the land of what's his face, Bessie Vanderkook. So thank you for listening, and thank you for just being a beautiful part of the show. Elise Landowski, thank you for being my empathy hero. this week.
All
right. How about you, Dene? Who's your empathy hero?
My empathy hero. I'm going to do someone famous if it's okay. I'm going to do Oprah Winfrey.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I think Oprah because
Queen.
She is the queen. I've learned so much about God, so many of my spiritual lessons and life in general from Lady O. But I think about empathy, I used to watch her show. And I remember one of my lessons that I think has been so powerful for me as a human and certainly as a therapist, where she was interviewing a woman who had gone to prison for hurting her child. And she, was really in the space of wanting to understand this woman's life, understand what had gotten her to this point, understand her struggle. And, at the end of the interview, she said something that even as I think about it now, brings tears to my eyes. She said, I understand. That was what you did with your pain. I do something different with mine.
Mm.
And I felt like, that she saw that woman in her humanity and how the trauma and the experiences of her life had manifested in maybe pain that was different from hers, but that we all do what we know how to do with whatever pain we've been given in our lives. And it just was such a powerful lesson for me. And I've gotten so many of those from Oprah. She's incredible.
That's really beautiful.
Mm.
I admittedly haven't watched much Oprah, but I do recognize her certainly as someone doing good in the world and powerfully and on a level that's at the top, right? So yeah. That's a great one. Yeah. All right. Well, Dene, where can people connect with you and learn more about your therapy practice and all that good stuff?
Yeah, so I'm on Instagram. I'm Dene Logan Selkin on Instagram, and I practice therapy at a little house that's a community of therapists and healers, and we work collaboratively in just a beautiful home near Venice Beach. It's called Flow House Therapy. And you can find us online if you're in, Southern California area and you're interested in therapeutic services. We do somatic therapy and hypnotherapy and EMDR there. So you can find us at flowhousetherapy.com. And yeah, just been such an unbelievable pleasure, Noam. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Dene. And listeners, all those links are in the show notes. And I know there are LA-based listeners out there, so go check out Flow House Therapy. Sounds amazing. Connect with Dene. And thank you, Dene, for being a part of this.
Oh, thank you so much.
You're welcome. And to you listeners, I'm here, you're here. We're here together on this wayward, overwhelming, awe-inspiring pale blue dot. We have each other. It's You, Me, Empathy.